let's dive in. I'm going to speak in. I don't want to speak about my project specifically, but I want to speak in terms of the technologies around it because I think
Yes.
there's some interesting
Yeah.
things, if that works. And then Lars, since you're part of the product, if you want to get into specific questions, we can do that as well.
Yeah. And Chris, why don't you start? I think I'm the only one who has the tiniest shred of context, and I don't even know how much you want to share. So,
Yeah, it's more a question of like what you want to share, but maybe
yeah,
we'll treat this as yeah, we'll see.
yeah.
I guess
So,
we'll see how far
yeah.
we'll see how far I go.
So treat this as the sneakiest of sneak peeks that has ever
This
sneaked.
is a special Thanksgiving treat.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but I'll start with a pure technology problem. You can see my screen?
Not yet. I have to click watch stream. Watch now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And now
Okay.
we hear go on.
Oh,
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
echo.
So we're gonna talk about web components actually, which is like I said, we'll do the weeds and then maybe we'll go a little bit higher. So and maybe we'll go further up the abstraction. We'll talk about Spectrum. Spectrum web components, of course, is so Adobe has a design language. It is called Spectrum. It's used for building UIs like Photoshop, etc. Recently, with React sort of getting getting kind of like dirty status, jQuery status, if you will. There's been a lot of teams, especially internally, that have started to pivot to web components, and Spectrum web components have existed for a very long time. One of the things that is as we get into this sort of rabbit hole, and I think it might even be, yeah, it'll probably say in here somewhere. I'll say the word lit. So you'll notice that Open Web Components uses lit, and their Spectrum also uses lit. And what lit is, they say don't call it a framework. Lit.dev. Is it lit. Oh, it is lit.dev. Okay, cool. We'll use their own words for it. Tiny footprint, although it's not that tiny. It's 5K. That
Just
to
a
me,
question.
Yeah.
Are you sharing something or showing only Discord? I see Discord.
You're sharing the
Oh,
screen.
geez.
Yeah.
The sharing did not go. Let me try share. Can I just? Oh, screens. Thank you for asking. Okay.
Yeah, super.
Sorry.
Yeah, looks better.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. So Spectrum Web Components is this whole UI library. It's open source. Anyone can use it. It's really great. Performance is a different question. This is not performant. Do not expect it to be performant.
So, and for the non-Adobe folks watching, Spectrum is Adobe's design system, right? It's having the right kind of gray and having the right kind of blue on the buttons and using Adobe Clean everywhere.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's our UI library that we use to build applications. Everything from Photoshop to AEM sites. And so Spectrum Web Components uses a framework called Lit. Primarily because React, so a lot of the reasons why you would maybe use a framework instead of maybe vanilla JavaScript is you want to build a stateful application or an application that is high in interactivity. Most of our content on adobe.com is not that, so we don't use any frameworks to build those things. But if you have something like, let's say, they probably have an accordion here. Yeah, an accordion, where you're kind of like, okay, when I hover, what does it do? When I open this up, what do these other things do? Do I want to have the others close when this opens, et cetera, et cetera? So this kind of high interactivity. You can just think of it, it really is single page applications. Like I said, the bulk of adobe.com is multi-page applications, so we don't really use it. We do have use cases. You saw in our localization demo where we do build single page apps for our authors. We have historically stayed away from web components because they have come with performance problems. if you even go look at the lit documentation, again, the kind of and web components by themselves as a standard do provide some reactivity. They actually have something called attribute changed. Attribute changed callback. Yeah, I'm trying to find something that would be using. Maybe it's got attribute changed. Yeah. So you have these lifecycle events. So if you change an attribute on the element, then things are great. The problem is, like, you might have objects and things that you want to store on that element, and your application will not update. So you don't get that sort of reactivity. And so that's kind of where lit comes in. Is like they're like, hey, assign properties, set internal properties, and we'll update your UI based off of those properties. So you can just change your state and we'll update. And so there's some value here. The challenge that I have faced, that all sounds great. It's like native web technologies, cool. But then it's like, wait a minute, I have to use a library? Well, what happened to using a browser? Okay, what is this library giving me? Okay, it's giving me some stateful stuff. Okay. Well, if I'm going to use a library, and here's my point, and why we decided to go with something else, which was also the other thing is lit was not buildless up until fairly recently, like within the last year or so, last 8 months. And so it was like, okay, so I have to have a build system. Obviously, we know in edge delivery land, we don't really like build systems. I was like, okay, so you give me a stateful application framework, and you're small, but you require a build process. And there was another piece, which is you're asking me to write CSS and JavaScript. So if you even look at the documentation and you go into like styles, they're going to tell you, yeah, just write your styles in JavaScript. So like, forget all linting. Linting is out the door. Like code, like your quality of your stuff is totally out the door.
Yep.
And so like they're literally saying like, no, even if you have complicated styles, write them in the JavaScript. That is just not going to fly for a company that maybe has more CSS oriented developers, and maybe you have an org that and the other thing is with web components and this idea of Shadow DOM, which again, this is like maybe a whole deep dive into web components, but Shadow DOM allows you to encapsulate so you don't have like CSS leaking, style leaking out, which is great. We have this problem all the time. But to show this example here, if we inspect this, you'll notice somewhere in here, and I'm wondering if I'm not. You'll actually.
If you could command plus this so that it's a bit more readable.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So if we were to go to any of these, I wonder if we could actually go to the GitHub. Can we go to the API maybe? It's not going to give it me. I was hoping I could just go to the source code in here, but apparently that's not going to happen. But even in real world projects, they're saying that. And you'll notice that there's this little constructed style sheet, and this is what I want to talk about today. So that's all the context setting to get to this. If you're a fan of John Siracusa, maybe this is delightful. So the next thing is, it was like, well, I don't want to write CSS in JavaScript. So there's actually a brand new spec, and it is a spec. So we'll do CSS modules. It's called CSS module scripts. And effectively what it allows you to do is it allows you to import sheet. It allows you to import styles, and maybe I'll zoom in here as well. It will allow you to import a style sheet as if it is a JavaScript module. And not only, what's great about this is that you get all the module-like stuff. So the browser parses this file once. So if you have 5 accordions, your browser's not parsing over and over and over again. And you still get all this nice, and it's obviously a CSS file. So all your linting tools and everything just work.
Right.
And what's great is like in like a Franklin land, if we go to our good friends at like adobe.com, we'll just pull up this and we'll pull up this. You'll notice, and you would see this in aem.js or whatever, but for every component, we can do a find. Let's do marquee.css. So you'll notice we add a link style sheet. We add a link element for every block that's being used. You can see all of these blocks that we used. And you will get, because of the way this works, and there's good parts and bad parts, but you will get style, and we dedupe, of course, so if you use 2 marquees and everything. But we do it in this very like with the best tools that we have, right? With the sort of tooling that we're able to do, because the world is honestly, for the most part, still not ready for web components. Especially for like regular old, visitor-facing websites. So this sounds great, and if you look at the performance, this was a really fun chart to see. Again, check your sources and everything, but adding a link element, and we're talking 15,000 custom elements, so keep that in mind. But a link element is going to give you this performance. If you just directly inline your style element, you're going to get this performance, and this is time to load. This is not parsing or anything like that. And then if you use the CSS module, it's much lower. And you can just see like parsing is way down. You obviously don't have to insert a style tag. You don't have to insert a link tag. You do have to fetch. I don't know why this is a little funny. I don't know why that would be called. And then what you end up doing is once you have that sort of CSS module, you can just assign it to adopted style sheets. So this all sounds great, right? It's like greens across the board. This looks very friendly, and I can write CSS and all this stuff. It's super wonderful. Here's the problem. We didn't write it. It's right in here. It is not supported in Safari. Status new. Last modified 2022 March, so we're almost up on a year now. So this is not supported in Safari. And what about Firefox?
But maybe also not in older browsers, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so you could actually do can I use, and we could say the CSS modules. I don't know if that's in here. Script modules. Is that going to be in here? But yeah, you're 100% right. We generally, in the adobe.com land, when we are building like author-facing applications, we're a little less strict about what browsers we support, because generally it's like maybe 100 authors that we can say, no, you need to use Chrome, but generally, yeah, you want to be careful about what your visitors are going to support. So the question was, well, what can we support? And the answer is you can still do adopted style sheets, and Safari supports that as of 6.4, if I remember correctly. We can go look this up. So there's a thread of an idea here, which is, okay, we've got adopted style sheets, and again, this supports back to 6.4. All right, well, how could we get to an adopted style sheet? And so that's kind of where I'll show this this application. So I just have all these web components here. You see DA content, DA editor, DA palette. The DA stands for dark alley, which again we'll get into if Lars wants to. But what we can do is, if we look in here, instead of just having one import, we actually have get sheet. So this is actually a file, so sheet.js. And we have DA preview. So we have just our CSS file. Again, we want to be friendly to those CSS developers and those linting tools. So we get out a sheet. And then down here, we can attach, hey, look, just like we would have as if we used a CSS module. There is a small overhead because you're, of course, downloading this sheet.js. It's, I don't know, we can look at the size later. And if we do go look at sheet.js, let's go to definition. We take a URL, and if we already have it in our sort of store, so we don't have to like re-parse it, we don't have to re-download it or anything. If we don't have it, of course, we'll fetch it and then we'll get the plain text out. We'll create a new style sheet object. We will replace it with the text. Again, these are you can go look at the MDN specs. And then we'll assign it. So again, this gets instantiated once when you first import the module, and then you return the sheet. And now you have Safari compatibility and Firefox compatibility. It's really quite great.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's also nice, and I thought I could do a try catch where Chrome could use the newer syntax, but Firefox just totally died. It was like, I do not understand this syntax at all. I'm not even going to get out of the try. It just failed. So I had to do this. So unfortunately, this affects all browsers. You can't use CSS modules for Chrome, but it is a very clean way. And finally, I feel like a lot of my boxes are checked where I can finally use web components instead of something like Preact, which is what we were using on adobe.com.
Have you looked at scripted import maps?
I have. I actually use them.
Okay, so one thing that I saw was to use scripted import maps in order to handle this browser support issue that you had, right? Where you would simply say, for Chrome, I'm going to resolve the scripts.js as one implementation, and for other browsers that don't have the CSS module scripts.
Oh my
support,
gosh, that's brilliant.
right? And that way your code stays reasonably clean. You don't mix the polyfill together with the regular code, and once the support is there, your import map would automatically align, right? So it would be a bit of capability testing in the import map. So
Yeah. Like, I mean, and that's actually why I did. And we've talked about putting the import map directly in head HTML,
right.
but my spidey sense said I may want to do logic here. So you just found my use case.
Well,
it's
you can
absolutely brilliant.
You can put the import map in a script tag inside head HTML, right? How you deliver it is really more a question of how many HTTP requests do I want to squeeze into the first window? But
yeah. So let's maybe show the cause and effect of this. So I'll do a little bit more context setting. Is it still the same audience?
Yes, I think Alex joined us. Alex.
Which Alex?
Alex Carroll.
Alex,
you might want to turn on your camera and say hi, just so that Chris recognizes you.
Hi.
Hey,
hello,
hey Chris.
Okay.
Hey, Alex. Good to see you.
So we're gonna put this all together. And like Lars said, this is some research we're doing on adobe.com. I think Lars, I stole your quote for my little one pager. So most know we're on SharePoint, and we're trying to move a lot of documents. We support hundreds, if not thousands, of authors. We call it the red pill of death, where you see the red pill and Sidekick is like, I cannot talk to the SharePoint APIs when you're just trying to preview something.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of frustrations there. And we've also had this scenario where we're in Word here, and somebody's like, oh, so if I change the text color here, that's going to change to red, right? And we're like, no. So it's like, it was kind of funny because we all got really excited about Word because everyone knew how to use it, but now we're trying to teach people like, well, these are the buttons that change things, and these are the buttons that don't change things.
Mm-hmm.
So there was kind of this confluence of problems that we were starting to have on Adobe.com. So I started this research project. I think Lars, you always say it so good. It's like we're idiots for trying to build CMSs. If you were smart, you would stop on the first try or something.
Well, the thing that I'm saying is that every web developer worth their salt tries to develop a content management system once, and the smarter ones stop at that point, and the rest of them work for Adobe. So
Yeah. Yeah. So just because I haven't tried this, but it should all work in theory. We're going to open up Safari. And so yeah, maybe I'll actually open up I work on this on my PC laptop, but oh yeah, perfect. So basically we're again Adobe.com. We're doing this research project. We call it Dark Alley. The reason why it's called Dark Alley is because we all go down a lot of dark alleys, and when we explore new ideas, and we do this to see if there's light at the end of the tunnel. So this is not a foregone conclusion that this will work or anything like that. And also, when I was talking to David at Summit, and I said Lars came up with this really cool idea where you can have this like GitHub hook and publish these things, and it's all really cool. And he said, Lars goes down a lot of dark alleys, and so for some reason that name just really struck with me. So
yep.
That's why it's called Dark Alley. But basically, we aim to be a first-class citizen and content provider for AEM edge delivery services. It aims to provide a fully integrated and authenticated experience that are really hyper-specific to WCMS needs. Like if we look here, give a really good example. So we wanted to do version history here in Word. And of course, we cannot execute JavaScript here because then you can steal, CEO secrets and stuff. So, but what we can do is we can open up like version history here, and you'll notice a pop-up window to log in, and then we get our experience here. And so it's like, wow, we're really the term I used is we're really trying to put a square peg in a round hole here. So we're exploring this idea. This idea that can we be a content provider just like Google Drive, just like Markdown, just like SharePoint. So what does that look like? And this is where all this web component exploration happened and whatnot. So let's see if my my little polyfill worked out. So main DAC, go here. And we get presented with a little thing, and we'll just go ahead and bypass this. And I guess it does work. And so we can go into, I think we have this Lars was here, and say hi. Hi, Lars.
Hey.
And so this, I sent this to Lars. I'm like, hey, check this out. And he's like, this doesn't work. Sorry.
No,
So it now works, Lars.
The thing is, I was already impressed. You sent this, I think, on Sunday night, something like that.
Yeah.
So I was already impressed to see. Oh well, what is this? Looks like a file browser. Okay, then I knew how to resolve the GitHub URL from the Helix URL you sent me, and said,
oh yeah,
okay,
yeah. This
so
is just
Chris has 429 good reasons to try to build an alternative to SharePoint. I get this, and then I saw a couple days later you said, hey, I've got something new, which is the editor, and that one at the time worked in Chrome but not in Safari, and
yep.
yeah.
So I've talked to a couple people and shown them stuff, and then David has been like, hey, have you thought about X? And I'm like, yes, I have. I just haven't implemented it. Well, when somebody asks you about it, they're obviously thinking about it, and so you want to deliver it. So the first thing is you'll see this little preview
Yeah.
icon here. So we can just click on this. And of course, if your browser is reasonably wide enough, you can just switch between. So you can just see, oh, here's what it looks like on a laptop, and we can see our this is fully live, so you can start the YouTube video and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But what and so then of course send this off. Hey, look, we have we have like instant previews, and it's like, oh, wouldn't it be great if like when I change the content here, it automatically updates? And it's like, yeah, that's a really cool idea. So we can say, maybe we can say, I don't know, hello, Lars, this is actually your page. And boom, there it is.
Mhm.
And so what's really interesting is if you are like sort of, if you've got work in progress, like you're typing, you really don't. This has been some like user experience tweaks that we've done. And again, this is all using web components.
Yep.
So I'm passing properties around, and this is listening for changes and all sorts of fun stuff. It's wildly complicated, and by wildly complicated, I mean it's wildly simple. So what's cool is you could be like, what we do is like when you pause and there hasn't been any changes detected for about a second or two, that's when we will send it on over. And so there is, so if we say, oh, you know what, I don't want this video here, it will of course just remove, or maybe I want, maybe I put in some, this is my awesome text. It's super cool. And then pause, and then it updates. Because like you actually run the risk of like breaking blocks, because if you're in the middle of like setting a variation or something like that. What we can do, which is kind of fun, is if we go to Milo tools. Actually, you know what we could do is, do you have a pet Helix project you like? Actually, you know what? We'll use a Milo project, which is fine. Tools, library.
I have to put a pin into this. I have to tell you a fun story about my pet Helix project.
Okay. What?
You do check that.
Did we lose you?
No, I'm
I
still
can't
here.
see my screen. Oh, what's your?
So
Oh, you,
so my pet project is I have a mini Velos website, which really is
oh yeah.
and let's say the plural is very that's the ambitious tense.
Mhm.
So it currently has one bike on it, but of course it was built to have many bikes on it, and
Yeah.
And somehow this page ended up in Google Maps.
Oh jeez.
So this afternoon I got a call from somebody saying, "Oh well, we are running. We are selling ad spaces in grocery carts." And you can basically send us an A4 letters back if you want to advertise with us. And I was super confused why they would call me, right? And I asked them, okay, who do you think you're talking to? And they said, well, we think you are Lars Trilov of the mini Velo of the bicycle rental place. And then I thought, okay, now the coin dropped, and I thought, okay, now I get where you're coming from. That's really interesting because I don't really rent out bicycles. I just build them and take photos of them.
Yeah.
And then I asked them, okay, how did you acquire my data, right? Because just under GDPR, I have the right to know this, and also I'm curious. And I told them, however you got that data, you should ask for your money back because your data is BS. And then she told me, oh well, we don't buy the data, we just use Google we just use Google Maps, and basically they're running the
Oh,
ads in a
geez.
local grocery store as a pilot. So they looked for
Yeah.
local businesses and found me through Google somehow. So
Oh, geez.
I have to do some talking to Google to get this fixed, and historically that can take a while. So all of your SEO optimization with Google, with www.google.com, is nothing compared to get something fixed and updated in maps.google.com.
Jeez.
So,
Wow.
yeah, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. So yeah, while you're talking, just kind of like finding some blocks and pasting them in. What's kind of fun is like if you do go to, we'll use Chrome because I don't have if we go to business, we'll try and do we'll do AEM sites. I don't know how many Milo blocks there are here, but what we can do is we can just view document source, right? We all love this feature. So if we look media, text, tabs, media, section metadata, media, these are all like straight up just regular old Franklin Milo, like most of these section metadata obviously exists in Milo boilerplate. Looks like there's a card. But what we can do is just works out of Sidekick. So we'll just copy this whole thing and throw ourselves over back into here, do a little select all, get rid of all that. And then we'll just paste it all in and wait for it. And boom, there it is. And yeah. So
Mostly.
pretty
Yeah.
fun. And we'll undo. So yeah, that's my exploration into web components and like
Right.
making the developer experience really good and yeah, the use case that brought this about.
Yeah. So the real-time preview that you have on the right hand, that's not making a server round trip, right? It's
Nope.
It's all in the browser, and
All in the browser.
because
Yeah, let me
It's-
maybe here, we'll do this real quick. I'll show you. So, and I actually raised because I had some questions about this. So you really want, I mean, this is just how much work has been sort of thought about this. You want tables when you're editing. Like I am a huge believer in document-based editing, having done AEM sites for a very long time, and I've used WordPress. I've used every CMS known to humans. You really want tables, but of course, here on this side, you need divs.
Right.
And what's funny is like we've been doing these round trips for a very long time. Library, we had to take divs and convert them to tables. So we're really well versed in this sort of like transpilation, if you will.
Right.
So what I have the editor that we're using is this very flexible, and I believe it started out in Atlassian, but it's called Prosmere. And it's highly flexible. But if we look at, we'll go to index, and you'll see that we have this pros to AEM function.
Mm-hmm.
So it just takes the editor and says, hey, pros to AEM. And so if we go look at this, what we can see is we pass in an element and we remove some attributes. We remove some like custom stuff that makes the authoring pretty good. Like there's some things to get carriage returns and all those things. Trailing breaks, same thing. We remove any empty paragraph tags because Franklin doesn't really support, or for obvious reasons, you don't want empty paragraph tags. And then we convert the blocks, so we convert tables to blocks. You obviously don't want the metadata block to be, right? That should be in the head, so we remove that. We wanted to make it so it's as like plain.html as humanly possible. So we create a picture tag, even though the editor is speaking in terms of just a single image tag. The AEM markup expects those pictures. So we make pictures with source and source sets. And then we make sections. So again, for the author experience, you want these like beautiful section breaks. So like I can just go in here and just say like boom, and now I have this visibility again. We're playing with house money here. It's not 3 dashes in Word. You want these like really nice section breaks, but in reality, like those should convert to parent divs for the elements that are sandwiched between them. So we do that. And then Helix admin, and it's really Helix to, or no, HTML to MD maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's HTML to MD, the Helix project.
Right.
Expects to have a main element and a body element. So we make those and we push it in. And then you're delivering out fully client side
Right.
the exact DOM that you would get out of plain HTML. And if you look at, so we send this over, we use post message API. So if you look at this is the entire, so we also do, this is like, and there's more. You'll notice that this page is exactly the height of the content. And that's because we're sending messages back and forth. We actually tell the parent, hey, the iframe needs to be this size now.
Right.
So once we had, sending messages, it was like, all right, let's start sending the body.
Yeah.
So we send the body down, and you can see it here. It's very complicated stuff, right? Like 30 lines of code. Document body outer HTML is the body that we deliver it, and then we just call the load page
Right.
function that's part of any boilerplate project,
Right.
and it'll just work.
Yeah. So the thing that I remember is that when the Helix team still had ambitions to build an editor, we've been thinking very, very hard about how we can, on the one hand, use Markdown as the definite format, right, which we are still using for storage, but at the same time keep the experience fast enough, right? Basically so fast that you cannot afford a real server-side round trip, and additionally keep the entire thing simple enough that you don't have to implement the same stuff over and over again, right? Because ideally we would want to have as much shared code between client and server. And it's really interesting to see how some of the design decisions we've made down the way, right? Like saying, yep, we use Markdown as persistence, but the interchange format, the API, is actually HTML, right? And it's not just, and whenever I say our API is HTML, some of the API folks that I'm talking to are rolling their eyes very, very hard because they say HTML cannot be an API. And then I said, do you know anything about REST? Do you know anything about hypermedia being the engine of application state? And what do you think hypermedia is, and what do you think the H in HTML stands for? And right, so this is a decision that then in the end enabled you to do something that is essentially happening totally on the client side, because you're working with the familiar API, and that familiar API is HTML, and is a particular DOM tree that you can interact with.
Yep, exactly. That's one of the things is like, when you start getting into Markdown parsing, you're doing a lot more work client side.
Right.
And so Markdown is really great for viewing and writing, but every developer can speak JavaScript. So if I say I have this body tag, what should I do with it? That. What's fantastic is that this is just a regular AEM edge delivery project.
Right.
You can, once you hit preview, we don't exist. Like the Dark Alley project does not exist. So you get all the Markdown and everything. And as long as you speak in those terms. It's funny you mentioned that, Lars. Like we're having this another issue that's kind of bubbling up in our world is like we hand off for Loc, we hand off Word docs, and those are very big because the binaries are stored in the Word docs. Right. And so they're like, hey, can you stop doing that? And we're like, cool. What format should we send? And they're like, well, we would like xlif. And then we were like, well, what about Markdown? We really like Markdown. One nice thing about Markdown is you get the metadata block, whereas you don't get that in plain HTML. And then we kind of settled on for the kind of like granularity that we need. We settled on HTML again, friendly APIs and all of that. But what's funny is like we started talking about, well, what do we do about Excel? Because if I say this small string or this column needs to be not translated, how do we say that? Or how do we not burden the authors, but we still tell our localization provider that we don't want this column translated without making the author say do not translate, right? So we need something there because JSON just doesn't have that sort of fidelity. And so we actually settled on, well, let's send HTML. We can make a dumb row or div separated list, and we can actually say, oh yeah, no, this column should be separated, or this column should not be translated, or these keys should not be separate or translated. So we're actually using HTML, or the current proposal is to use HTML as the interchange format to give us that granularity of what to loc and what not to loc.
Yeah. So
great call out.
So the HTML is an interchange format, and I would say the success that we are having with this approach, and that closes the loop to web components, is on the other hand actually burying one of my pet peeves, which is I think eventually we would want blocks to be custom elements, right? Instead of just being divs with classes. And I built a prototype. Well, it's a world famous mini Velo website, of course, that is built using custom elements for every single block. And and it's not that the server is rendering custom elements, but that I'm basically taking the Helix HTML, turn it into custom elements, and then load the custom element, and that probably won't happen ever, given the not so rapid pickup of custom elements in general, right? And on the other hand, the commitment that we have with regards to backwards compatibility and our increasingly, well, I think it's fair to say that our willingness to break HTML compatibility has gone from nearly zero to actually zero in the past year, and that is, well, that's how great formats exist, right? You build them, and because they're being used, they become the de facto, and then you can just add things to it, but you can never take things away.
Yeah, we had that question, and we struggle with this with developer contributions. If you run into scoping issues, and I think what's great is like we have shown in the AEM edge delivery world that you can manipulate DOM and still be very fast, fastest websites in the world. And so if there is a scenario where we decide, as a project, right? And I think the EDS, the Edge Delivery HTML API allows for this, which is like, hey, if you decide that you want to convert every first class name into the element, into a custom element, then you have the freedom to do that. If you run into scoping issues and you really think that that's the way to solve it, you're totally free to do that. And there's some, I showed some of the web component research to the team, not Dark Alley, and they were really excited, and they're like, wow, should we do all blocks like this? I'm like, I'm not ready to pull the trigger on that, but it's now kind of in the cards. The APIs allow for us to do that. So
I'm thinking of the meme that says you're using web components because you need reactivity and you need scoped CSS. I'm using web components because I think the API is pretty. We are not the same. So and I think for me, to a certain degree, it's I would rather want to align to something that is a well-known API, right? And web components are the closest thing to let's say a standardized API. It's not yet well known, and that's probably one of the breaking points. And in addition to this, they offer a lot of features, but most of these features are really most relevant for single page applications instead of multi-page sites.
Exactly.
So,
I think to your point, and I saw Carl joined. I am a Java developer through and through. Like I prefer writing Java, like more than JavaScript. I have always hated JavaScript. So when I saw that JavaScript, when I saw that JavaScript supported classes, this was like 2017 timeframe. I'm like, oh my gosh, JavaScript is finally not terrible. Like I can just say like if it has a class and I can like make it tell this object to do the things that it needs to do, and I don't have to think about it. And so like that for me, it's exactly what you said, which is like it's a really pretty. The web component API is very pretty, and it's like I can reason about it. I'm like, this is the preview component. Go do your stuff, and I don't need to think about you.
Yeah.
And later on we realized like, oh, not all browsers support classes, and this was again years ago. So it was like, oh, maybe we should be more functional, and and there's some value to that. But yeah, +1 on the like, it's kind of nice to just have a class. I feel like at home, like I'm writing Java again.
Yeah. I
Anyway.
won't agree with any of these points that mention Java with you. Uh,
Well, the
I guess
tooling,
so.
like, I don't want Maven or anything like that, but like the reasoning, I really really love.
yeah.
Come on, what's wrong with
Constructors.
Maven? Come on. Maven. Oh, he's gone. I don't know. I mean, JavaScript's classes. So, I mean, for me, the biggest downside is that this whole pointer thing. I mean, it's just like they give you classes, but in the end, you have to struggle with this inside the classes, which kind of makes the whole thing terrible again, because
Yeah.
you get all the downsides of classes, plus they don't even work because the upsides don't work with this pointer. So I don't end up using much classes in JavaScript. It's a little bit better when I use TypeScript. There I think that combination, it makes a little bit more sense. But for plain JavaScript, I'm not that much of a class fan.
Okay, so you all have to look up today's XKCD, because I think no matter what discussions you're going to have at the Thanksgiving dinner table with your unhinged uncle, is going to be as wild as the discussion you're having about the merits and demerits of using Maven versus Webpack. So,
Oh gosh.
so yeah.
Yeah.
It is funny though. I mean, doing mostly JavaScript lately. I mean, trying to do Java is actually harder than I thought. I
Yeah.
just recently had to look at some Java. I was like, what the hell is going on?
Welcome to the club.
It's going away fast.
Yeah.
So.
Welcome to the club.
I actually know the guy that wrote Prose Mirror. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's Atlassian. I mean, he did Code Mirror first, right? So
Yeah.
he did Code Mirror, and then after that Prose Mirror. But he used to be in Berlin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Marvin. He was very early on involved in Rust. He was working for Mozilla.
Okay.
It's a really great. I went through a lot of different tools on that front, because trying to write something from scratch is really quite miserable. You think it's easy. I'm used to doing scorched earth projects where I'm like, just let me learn from the ground up, and it's probably going to be better. It was not better. There's a lot of and Prose Mirror is really, I cannot say enough good things about it. Lars and I did some collaborative editing. I guess it was last week, and it was usable. Needs to show you where your cursors are, but for a demo, it worked, and so.
And the most impressive thing is I was in an iPhone, or I was on an iPhone inside the Slack in-app browser, right? So probably the worst browser experience you can get on the best mobile platform that you can buy, but it actually worked, right? And we didn't I didn't try to go back and forth between Slack's messaging and the editing interface. I just wrote whatever came to mind into the editor, and as soon as we figured out not to try to edit the same paragraph at the same time, we could continue the conversation.
That's pretty cool what he did. I mean, again, I mean, the main insight back then, I talked with him while I was doing it. This idea to just use a content editable, right, was always the tempting one.
Right.
And the insight obviously was that that he had at one point of time is that the browsers are so different in what they generate inside the content editable. That's what made it hard, right? And then the separation of saying you have a schema.
Yep.
And that you can freely define, but then it will adhere to that schema in the code, or in the content, whatever you want to call it, in the DOM tree in the content editable, right? I mean that was the kicker. I mean, it's so nice that you can just put your schema in, and then it will make sure that everything looks like this. I mean, if you ever did content editable hacking, it was terrible before.
It like, and trying to get the table support and everything. I'll
Just
actually
the browser
show.
differences would kill you, right? I mean, that was the main thing, right? I mean, Firefox would put in a P and then put the caret
Yep.
behind it, and
Yep.
Safari
Yep.
would do nothing and crash. And so it was so bad.
Yeah,
So that's really cool.
Carl, I feel like I need to assign you some tickets for this. With your already expansive knowledge on this, but yeah, we have the schema. You get it from the base schema, and then you add the list nodes, and then we have table nodes, and like you build that out, and then you have your keyboard shortcuts, and so I'm going to send you some tickets to help improve the editor, because I'm trying to get it to be more like Word. There's a couple little idiosyncrasies, but I'm not familiar enough with the API to get there yet. So
That's interesting. I mean, it has really interesting features, because back in the day, what I used it for too is it has this in the schema. You can also have your own plugins, effectively, right?
Yeah.
And then so you give it your own implementation for those, and it just treats it like a normal object or whatever, and then it gets moved around. You can delete it, you can undo it, and stuff like that. But you can make it a button or whatever you want to, because you have full control. That's pretty cool. So I mean,
yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you know it as well as you do. I know who to ask questions.
My knowledge is years old, because in between I had to do Java, but I'm pretty sure he didn't change that much since then.
No, it's great. The API is really well thought out, with all the marks and the schema, the updates, and like the transactions, the transforms. I mean, it's really comprehensive.
Okay,
Cool.
friends.
That's all I got.
I think we're going to end on time today, or as close to it as possible. And the reason for that is I still need to make sure that we have dinner tonight, which means going to the bakery before it closes. And I'm really glad to on the one hand that Chris could share a bit more of the sneakiest sneak peek history that ever sneaked. Because I think it's super interesting to see this. It's a testament to the extensibility, and of course to the power of the community that we have here, right? So despite Chris being carrying the same Adobe badge that I carry, he really is one of our customers, right? And on the other hand, I'm also really happy that for the first time that we're having this frequency, everyone turned on their camera. So this feels like a super nice hangout. And I'm glad I have all of you as part of the AEM community. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of you in 2 weeks, some of you next week, and yeah. So that's my way of saying thank you for being a part of this community, and thanks for dialing in.